There is a question that nobody asks at the doctor's office. Not because the answer does not exist, but because the answer was written down long before the office did. What if everything the aging body needs after 50? The repair, the strength, the steadiness, the protection from the slow erosion that modern life calls normal was already prescribed? Not in a clinical trial, not in a supplement label, but in the most studied, most translated, most preserved document in human history. Today we walk through 20 biblical foods that the body after 50 was made to receive. Foods that ancient people ate as daily provision. Foods that modern culture replaced with something cheaper, faster, and far less faithful to what the body actually needs. And by the end of this, you will not see your kitchen the same way again. Because what was once called ordinary may have always been part of something much closer to divine design. Stay with me, because the first food on this list was described by an ancient prophet as the cure for everything except death. And the research that has followed that claim for decades has not been able to disprove it. Number 1. Black seed, Nigella sativa, the seed that prophetic tradition described as containing a cure for every disease except death. Found in the tomb of Tutankhamun, among his most prized possessions, and now the subject of over 2,000 published studies that researchers have still not been able to disprove. After 50, the body begins to carry burdens it once shed easily. Inflammation that used to resolve now lingers. Infections that once passed quickly now settle longer. Energy that once returned overnight now takes days to come back. Many people accept this as simply getting older. But there is a difference between the natural passage of years and the accumulated damage of a life lived without the provisions that Scripture understood as sustaining the body through exactly this season. Black seed has been used medicinally across the Middle East for over 3,000 years. It was found in Tutankhamun's burial chamber, among the things the king's people believed he would need beyond death. The primary compound thymoquinone has been studied in over 2,000 peer-reviewed papers for its effects on inflammation, immune function, blood sugar, and the body's ability to resist the organisms that modern medicine struggles most to control. The ancient world named it correctly. The research has not been able to disprove the claim. What was buried with a pharaoh may be exactly what the aging body has been searching for. But the second food is even more startling, because it was not given by a prophet. It was given by the Magi, the wisest men of their age, as a gift to the newborn Christ. And most people have only ever thought of it as incense. Number 2. Frankincense, boswellia resin, brought as one of 3 gifts to the newborn Christ in Matthew 2:11, consumed as food and medicine across the ancient world for conditions we now call arthritis, inflammatory bowel disease, and asthma, with clinical trials confirming anti-inflammatory effects that pharmaceutical drugs have struggled to match without the side effects. The Magi did not bring random gifts. They brought gold, frankincense, and myrrh, 3 substances that the wisest, most educated men of their era understood as the most medically significant preparations available. Frankincense was consumed, not only burned. It was dissolved in water and taken internally. It was applied to wounds. It was breathed in closed spaces where its compounds crossed into the bloodstream through the lungs. After 50, the enemy is often invisible. It is the chronic, low-grade inflammation that settles into the joints, the gut, the blood vessels, and the brain. Modern medicine has drugs for it, drugs that often damage the stomach lining, strain the liver, or create new problems to manage alongside the original one. The boswellic acids in frankincense resin inhibit the same inflammatory enzyme that pharmaceutical anti-inflammatory drugs target, but without those costs. Clinical trials have confirmed meaningful reductions in joint pain, gut inflammation, and asthma symptoms. The gift the wise men brought to Christ was not ceremonial. It was the most sophisticated anti-inflammatory preparation in the ancient world. And the aging body, struggling under the weight of inflammation no one can see, may need it more than it needs almost anything else on a pharmacy shelf. Number 3. Carob, the locust bean that John the Baptist survived on in the wilderness in Matthew 3:4, containing up to 40% dietary fiber by dry weight, with antimicrobial compounds that were used in European hospitals for childhood illness before pharmaceutical alternatives existed, and a nutritional density that kept the most physically and spiritually resilient man in the Gospels alive in the harshest conditions imaginable. John the Baptist did not survive the wilderness on weakness. He was described as a man of extraordinary physical and spiritual endurance, living in conditions that would have destroyed most people, eating what the wilderness provided. And what the wilderness provided was carob. After 50, the body rarely needs more stimulation. It needs steadiness. It needs food that sustains rather than spikes. It needs what carob provides: deep, slow-releasing nourishment with fiber that regulates the gut, antimicrobial compounds that the ancient world relied on before penicillin, and the kind of dense, uncomplicated provision that keeps the body going without demanding that it process something it was never designed to handle. The modern diet has nearly erased this kind of food. It has replaced steady provision with constant stimulation, engineered snacks designed to disappear in the mouth and demand another immediately. The prophet who prepared the way for Christ was fed by the wilderness. He was not fed despite its simplicity, he was sustained because of it. And the aging body, worn down by decades of excess, may find healing not in adding something exotic, but in returning to exactly this kind of humble, faithful provision. Number 4. Bitter herbs. Prescribed by God as a mandatory component of the Passover meal in Exodus 12:8, whose compounds stimulate bile production, support liver detoxification, and activate the digestive processes that aging bodies most commonly lose, addressing the silent deterioration that modern diets accelerate by training the body to expect only sweetness. God did not prescribe bitterness at the Passover table as punishment. He prescribed it as part of a complete provision. The lamb for strength, the unleavened bread for simplicity, and the bitter herbs for something the modern world has almost entirely forgotten: the role of difficult flavors in keeping the body's most important internal processes functioning. After 50, digestion often weakens quietly. Meals that once felt light begin to feel heavy. Bloating becomes routine. Energy after eating becomes less predictable. The body is still processing, but it is working harder to do what once came automatically. Bitter compounds, the sesquiterpene lactones and glucosinolates in endive, chicory, and wild herbs, stimulate the liver to produce bile, activate digestive enzymes, and support the detoxification pathways that clear the body of what accumulates over decades of living. Modern culture has systematically removed bitterness from the diet. Every food has been sweetened, softened, and made easier to eat without resistance. And the quiet cost of that removal is a digestive system that has forgotten how to fire correctly. The Passover table was a complete meal designed by God. The bitterness was not an accident, it was the part that woke everything else up. Number 5. Saffron, listed in the Song of Solomon 4:14 among the most precious things in creation, commanding the highest price of any food in the world for 3,000 years. With multiple randomized controlled trials now confirming that its primary compounds reduce symptoms of depression and anxiety, comparably to pharmaceutical antidepressants, without the side effects that have quietly diminished the later years of millions of people. When Solomon described his beloved in the language of precious things, he reached for saffron. Every person hearing that comparison in the ancient world understood exactly what it meant: something of extraordinary, almost incomprehensible value. After 50, the body carries new burdens that no one talks about at the doctor's office. The quiet grief of a life that has changed shape. The anxiety that arrives with diagnosis, with retirement, with the slow departure of what was once familiar. The mental fog that settles and is often dismissed as just getting older. The Church has long understood that the soul and the body are not separate. But what Scripture preserved in saffron goes beyond spiritual comfort. Clinical trials have found that saffron's compounds reduce symptoms of mild to moderate depression, with effect sizes comparable to pharmaceutical antidepressants, and without the weight gain, the sexual dysfunction, the emotional blunting, and the difficult withdrawals that those medications often carry. The world's most expensive spice, named in the most intimate poetry of Scripture, was medicine for the mind long before modern psychiatry existed. And the aging heart, carrying weight that the body also feels, may need what Solomon honored more than any supplement catalog has offered. Number 6. Ezekiel's bread. Prescribed in Ezekiel 4:9 with 6 exact ingredients by name: wheat, barley, beans, lentils, millet, and spelt. Producing a nutritional profile that modern science has confirmed provides complete protein, sustained energy, and prebiotic fiber that commercial bread cannot match, in a formula that God prescribed to sustain a prophet through a season of deprivation. There is something almost unbearable about this truth. God prescribed bread, not in general terms, not as a symbol. He told Ezekiel exactly what to put in it, 6 ingredients in combination, to sustain a man through one of the most difficult assignments a prophet ever received. And the nutritional science that followed that prescription millennia later confirmed what divine provision already knew. The combination of grains and legumes in Ezekiel bread produces a complete amino acid profile, all the essential building blocks of protein in one preparation. The barley and millet contribute fiber and nutrients that slow blood sugar and feed the beneficial bacteria the gut depends on. The beans and lentils add protein and resistant starch that keeps the body steady for hours. After 50, what the body most needs is not more food. It is better food, food that provides without demanding, that sustains without spiking, that gives the gut something to work with rather than empty calories to process. The bread most people eat today shares almost nothing with what God prescribed. It is refined, enriched, and engineered for texture and shelf life. The bread God prescribed was engineered for something else entirely, for surviving what the world will put you through. If these foods are stirring something in you, a sense that what your body has been missing may have been written down long before any modern nutritionist discovered it, the complete biblical healing diet collection is in the first pinned comment below. 5 practical guides built around exactly these foods: biblical meals, breads, fermented preparations, and 2 special bonuses. Everything you need to start eating the way Scripture intended. Link is pinned below. Number 7. Dates. The fruit of the palm tree mentioned more frequently in Scripture and in prophetic tradition than any other fruit, sustaining ancient armies, pilgrims, and desert peoples through the most demanding conditions on Earth. With clinical research confirming mineral density, rapid natural energy, and effects during pregnancy that no one expected to find. The date palm is not celebrated in Scripture for its beauty. It is celebrated for its faithfulness. It provides in the desert. It sustains when nothing else can. It gives when the land gives nothing. After 50, this quality of provision matters more than anything flashy or exotic that the supplement industry might offer. The body after 50 needs food that is reliable. Dense with minerals the modern diet no longer provides: magnesium, potassium, copper, B vitamins, in concentrations that made dates the survival food of civilizations crossing terrain that would kill most people today. The natural sugars in dates are packaged with fiber that slows their absorption, preventing the spike and crash that refined sugar produces. The tree most mentioned in the most translated book in history was not chosen for ceremonial reasons alone. It was chosen because it kept people alive. And the aging body, searching for something steady to hold onto in a world of processed noise, may find in the date exactly the provision that desert pilgrims found in it: faithful, dense, and exactly enough. Number 8. Walnuts. From the nut garden referenced in Song of Solomon 6:11, whose appearance so closely resembles the human brain that ancient physicians concluded they were designed for it. With modern clinical trials confirming improvements in cognitive performance, memory, and processing speed, and the extraordinary detail that walnuts are one of the only plant foods containing melatonin. The ancient physicians who observed the walnut were not superstitious. They were observant. A 2-lobed, wrinkled nut enclosed in a hard shell that resembles a skull. They concluded that this was food for the brain, and they were not wrong. Modern neuroscience has confirmed that regular walnut consumption improves cognitive performance, memory, and processing speed across age groups. After 50, the brain is not going to be ignored. Mental fog, word retrieval that used to be instant, the slow erosion of what once felt sharp, these are not inevitable, but they are common. And the food the ancient world stored in king's gardens for a reason contains the omega-3 fatty acids that build brain cell membranes, the antioxidants that reduce the oxidative damage that accumulates in neural tissue, and melatonin, a compound found in almost no other plant food, that supports the sleep the aging brain depends on for its nightly repair. God placed the nut garden in the Song of Songs, the most intimate book of Scripture. What was treasured in that garden was always more than pleasure. It was provision for the mind that the aging world most needs to protect. Number 9. Figs. The tree Jesus cursed when it bore no fruit, the tree under which Nathanael sat when Jesus saw him, and the fruit whose poultice the prophet Isaiah prescribed for King Hezekiah's infection in the 2 Kings 27. The king recovering within 3 days, with modern research confirming exactly the antimicrobial and healing properties that make this the most medically documented fruit prescription in all of Scripture. Isaiah did not reach for figs at random. 2 Kings 20.7 records a moment of specific medical instruction. Prepare a fig cake, apply it to the king's infected wound, and he will recover. He did, in 3 days. Figs contain compounds with confirmed antimicrobial activity against the exact class of infection that this prescription addressed. They contain ficin, a proteolytic enzyme that breaks down infected and dead tissue. They contain pectin, a prebiotic fiber that feeds the beneficial gut bacteria that the immune system depends on. After 50, the body heals more slowly. Wounds that once resolved quickly can linger. Infections that were once minor can settle in. The immune response that was once automatic now needs more support. The fig that appears more times in Scripture than almost any other fruit was not there for decoration. It was there because the people who lived by it consistently observed that it worked. The prophet who prescribed it to a king was not guessing. He was reaching for what generations of careful observation had proven reliable. And the body after 50, slower to heal and more vulnerable to what it once shrugged off, may need exactly what Hezekiah received. Number 10. Goat's milk. The milk of the Promised Land described in Exodus 3:8, fundamentally different from commercial dairy in its protein structure, fat composition, and digestive profile, with research confirming that its A2 casein protein causes less inflammatory response than commercial cow's milk, and that its medium-chain fatty acids have antimicrobial properties that industrial dairy does not provide. When God described a land flowing with milk and honey, the milk was not what most modern people imagine. It was not pasteurized, homogenized, vitamin-added, fat-adjusted commercial dairy from cows bred for maximum output. It was goat's milk, the milk of an animal whose provision is fundamentally different at the molecular level. After 50, the relationship between what people eat and how their gut responds changes significantly. The inflammatory responses that mild food sensitivities once produced are no longer mild. The digestive ease that once absorbed dairy without complaint now pushes back against what industrial processing changed. Goat's milk has been shown to produce significantly less gut inflammation than commercial cow's milk, for reasons that nutritional research has only recently been able to articulate in molecular terms. The fat globules are smaller and more digestible. The primary protein is a form that the gut handles more gently. The medium-chain fatty acids include caprylic acid with confirmed antifungal properties. The Promised Land was not described as flowing with something ordinary. It was described as flowing with provision that the body was made to receive. And the body after 50, more sensitive than it once was, may find in what the Promised Land offered exactly the dairy it can actually use. Number 11. Pomegranate. Embroidered on the high priest's garments in Exodus 28, carved into the pillars of Solomon's temple in 1 Kings 7, listed among the 7 sacred species of the Promised Land. With antioxidant capacity that exceeds red wine, green tea, and blueberries, and compounds that modern oncology research has studied with genuine interest for their effects on cellular aging. When God designed the garments of the high priest, he included pomegranates. When Solomon built the temple, he carved them into the pillars. When the land of promise was described, the pomegranate was named among its defining gifts. This was not decoration. In every ancient culture that knew the pomegranate, it was understood as a food of unusual depth and power, associated with life, with royalty, with the kind of abundance that went beyond mere plenty. After 50, the body is fighting a battle that most people cannot see. Oxidative damage accumulates in cells. Inflammatory signals linger longer. The systems that once renewed themselves automatically require more support. Pomegranate's compounds, punicalagins found in almost no other plant source, are metabolized in the gut into substances that have drawn serious scientific attention for their effects on cellular health and the biological processes associated with aging. The antioxidant capacity of pomegranate juice exceeds almost every other commonly available food. The fruit that God placed on the garments of the priest standing between the people and the divine was always more than beautiful. It was protection. And the aging body, standing in its own kind of uncertain territory, may need exactly what it offered. Number 12. Raw honey. Described in Proverbs 16:24 as sweet to the soul and healing to the bones, given to Jonathan in 1 Samuel 14:27 with scripture noting his eyes brightened immediately, with clinical confirmation of activity against drug-resistant MRSA, and archaeologists finding 3,000-year-old honey in Egyptian tombs still fully edible, because no food on Earth has comparable antimicrobial properties. Scripture does not present honey carelessly. Proverbs 16:24 calls it healing to the bones. When Jonathan tasted it after a period of depletion, his eyes brightened, a specific physical observation of what raw honey does to a depleted body in real time. After 50, energy is no longer guaranteed. The brightness in the eyes that used to return automatically now sometimes requires something intentional. The immune system that once defended without being asked now needs provision it can actually use. Raw honey contains defensin-1, a protein that actively destroys bacterial cell walls, including those of MRSA, the antibiotic-resistant organism that modern hospital medicine struggles most to control. It contains hydrogen peroxide produced enzymatically on contact with tissue. It has been found in Egyptian tombs after 3,000 years still edible and still antimicrobial, because nothing can live in it long enough to spoil it. What most people consume from the grocery store shares the name, but almost nothing else. Pasteurized, filtered, sometimes adulterated with corn syrup, it is the shape of honey without the substance. The honey of Scripture was alive, it was medicine. And the aging body, more vulnerable than it once was to what the modern world carries, deserves something that actually defends it. Number 13. Fish, present at the feeding of the 5,000 in John 6, prepared by Jesus himself over charcoal on the shore of Galilee in John 21. The simplest possible preparation of the food that modern neuroscience has confirmed is most essential for brain health, providing the omega-3 fatty acids that make up critical portions of every brain cell membrane and whose absence modern populations carry as a silent epidemic. After the resurrection, with the whole of eternity before him and everything in creation available for the choosing, Jesus built a fire on a beach and cooked fish for his disciples. That detail is not incidental. The risen Christ chose the simplest food and the most honest preparation, charcoal, fish, bread, for one of the most intimate moments in the gospel. After 50, the brain is not optional. It is the organ through which every other gift is received: relationships, faith, purpose, memory, the daily recognition of what matters. And the brain depends on omega-3 fatty acids that cannot be manufactured by the body. They must come from food. The modern diet has replaced the fish that once provided them with processed alternatives whose inflammatory fat profiles do exactly what those fatty acids were supposed to prevent. Clinical research consistently finds that regular fish consumption is associated with lower rates of depression, cognitive decline, cardiovascular disease, and all-cause mortality. Jesus did not choose this food for the beach gathering by accident. He chose what nourishes most deeply. And the aging brain, navigating the second half of life, needs the provision that his choice quietly blessed. Number 14. Grape leaves. From the vine that appears over 500 times in Scripture, whose leaves the ancient Mediterranean world ate as food and medicine. Containing quercetin and resveratrol in concentrations the fruit itself does not always match. The vine that Jesus called himself in John 15:5, offering medicine in the part most people discard. I am the vine, you are the branches. John 15:5 is one of the most intimate declarations in all of Scripture. And the vine that Jesus chose as the image of his relationship with his disciples was not chosen casually. The vine appears 500 times in Scripture, more than almost any other plant. It was central to food, to medicine, to ceremony, to the covenant between God and his people. After 50, the inflammation that accumulates in the body needs more than good intentions to address it. It needs compounds with real mechanisms, quercetin that inhibits the same inflammatory enzymes as pharmaceutical NSAIDs, resveratrol that activates the cellular repair processes associated with longevity research, anthocyanins that protect the arterial wall from the oxidative damage that accumulates over decades. These compounds exist in the grape in meaningful concentrations. They exist in even higher concentrations in the leaves, the part that most modern people have never thought to eat. The vine that Jesus claimed as his own image was offering medicine in its every part: the fruit, the leaf, the seed, and the aging body Trying to navigate the second half of life with the same energy and clarity the first half allowed may need to receive the whole provision of what the vine was always offering. Number 15. Garlic. Mourned by the Israelites in Numbers 11:5 as one of the foods they lost when they left Egypt. Distributed to pyramid workers in documented rations specifically to maintain their strength and immune function, with clinical research confirming blood pressure reduction, comparable to pharmaceutical antihypertensives, and antimicrobial activity against organisms modern medicine cannot reliably defeat. Numbers 11.5 records one of the most human moments in Scripture. The Israelites in the wilderness, surrounded by the provision of God, weeping for the garlic of Egypt. This has been interpreted for centuries as weakness, ingratitude, spiritual failure. But there is something else in it too, the body's memory of what kept it strong. After 50, the cardiovascular system begins to carry burdens it once dismissed. Blood pressure rises, arteries stiffen. The circulation that once delivered everything the body needed now requires more support to do the same job. Garlic's allicin compound reduces blood pressure through a mechanism that cardiovascular research has confirmed produces reductions comparable to pharmaceutical antihypertensives in patients with elevated readings. It reduces LDL cholesterol. It has confirmed antimicrobial activity against organisms including MRSA. The people who wept for the garlic of Egypt were not wrong to miss it. Their bodies were right. What they mourned was not nostalgia. It was the memory of something that was actually protecting them. And after 50, the body that has spent decades without adequate provision of what garlic offers may be mourning the same thing, even if it cannot name what it has lost. Number 16. Olive oil, referenced over 140 times in Scripture, used by the Good Samaritan in Luke 10 as the first thing he poured into a wounded stranger's injuries, prescribed by James 5:14 for the healing of the sick, with the discovery that its primary anti-inflammatory compound produces the same throat sensation as liquid ibuprofen. The same mechanism from an oil that has been poured over food and wounds for 6,000 years. The Good Samaritan did not stop at a pharmacy. He poured what he had. And what he had was oil and wine, the two substances that the ancient world most trusted for wound care and healing. 140 references in Scripture do not accumulate by accident. They accumulate because generations of people observed what olive oil did and recorded it faithfully enough that the observations survived. After 50, inflammation is often the hidden cost of everything. The joint that aches without injury, the gut that protests without obvious cause, the fatigue that arrives without explanation. A researcher named Gary Beauchamp noticed that freshly pressed extra virgin olive oil produced a throat sensation identical to liquid ibuprofen. Investigation confirmed what that sensation meant. Oleocanthal, a polyphenol that inhibits the same inflammatory enzymes as pharmaceutical anti-inflammatory drugs, without the stomach damage, without the cardiovascular risk of chronic use, without the cost. The oil that anointed kings and dressed wounds and was prescribed for the sick by the Apostle James has been doing what pharmaceutical chemistry took 2,000 years to replicate. And it is still available in the first pressing, in the dark glass bottle, at the grocery store. The healing was never lost, only the memory of where to find it. Number 17. Lentils. The meal Esau traded his birthright for in Genesis 25, now confirmed by longevity research across every long-lived population on Earth to be the single most consistent dietary predictor of exceptional lifespan. Genesis 25 has been used for centuries to warn against trading eternal things for temporary comfort. But there is another reading available, one that takes Esau's hunger seriously. A bowl of lentils was worth a birthright to a man who needed it badly enough. That is not nothing. After 50, the body does not need excitement. It needs provision that is genuine, consistent, and faithful. Every study of the world's longest-lived populations, the blue zones across Sardinia, Okinawa, the Nicoya Peninsula, Ikaria, and Loma Linda, finds something that no cultural or genetic explanation accounts for fully. They all eat legumes, consistently, regularly. As a staple, not an afterthought, lentils provide 18 grams of protein per cooked cup. They are rich in folate, iron, zinc, and magnesium. Their fiber feeds the gut bacteria that the immune system and the metabolism depend on. Their glycemic impact is among the lowest of any carbohydrate-containing food. Esau knew what his body needed. He was not weak for wanting it. The body after 50 that is searching for something that truly sustains, not stimulates, not entertains, but sustains, may find it in exactly the humble bowl that Scripture recorded as worth more than a man's inheritance. Number 18. Barley. The grain of the 5,000, in John 6, the most ordinary provision Jesus chose to multiply, with beta-glucan concentrations so thoroughly proven to reduce cardiovascular risk that the FDA allows a specific health claim that most pharmaceutical cardiovascular supplements cannot achieve. When Jesus fed 5,000 people, the bread was barley, not wheat, not the more prestigious grain of the wealthy. The provision he chose to multiply was the food of ordinary people, the grain of the poor, the common, the humble who had gathered on a hillside without calculating whether they could afford to stay. After 50, the heart carries burdens that accumulate quietly. Cholesterol builds, arteries stiffen. The cardiovascular system that once managed everything without complaint now requires deliberate support. Barley contains the highest beta-glucan concentration of any grain, a fiber compound whose evidence for cardiovascular protection is strong enough that the FDA permits a specific health claim on products containing it. Reduced risk of coronary heart disease. A regulatory body does not permit health claims easily. The grain Jesus chose to feed the multitude has earned that recognition. And perhaps there is something worth sitting with in that. The provision that Christ multiplied for the hungry masses was not chosen for its glamour. It was chosen because it was faithful. And faithfulness, in food as in life, turns out to be exactly what the aging body most needs. Number 19. Cumin. The only spice Jesus named specifically in Matthew 23:23, valuable enough that the Pharisees brought it to the temple as a tithe, used medicinally for 4,000 years across the Middle East, India, and North Africa. With clinical trials now confirming meaningful reductions in blood sugar and HbA1c in people with type 2 diabetes. When Jesus named cumin in the Gospels, he was not providing a cooking lesson. He was acknowledging that certain things in creation were genuinely valuable enough that people brought them before God, while warning against allowing religious precision about small things to crowd out the larger matters of justice and mercy and faithfulness. Cumin was worth tithing because cumin was worth something real. After 50, blood sugar often becomes one of the body's most pressing management challenges. The metabolism that once processed carbohydrates without difficulty now responds to the same foods with rises that linger and consequences that accumulate. Clinical trials have found that cumin supplementation meaningfully reduces fasting blood sugar and the long-term blood sugar marker that physicians use to track diabetes control in people who already have the condition. The spice considered valuable enough to bring before God was medicine precise enough for modern endocrinology. And perhaps the lesson is the same that Jesus offered in a different form. What is genuinely valuable was always right in front of us. We simply forgot to honor it as such. Number 20. Coriander. The seed compared directly to manna in Numbers 11.7, the food God provided when nothing else existed, found in the tomb of Tutankhamun among the most valued possessions of a king. With modern research confirming anxiolytic effects, antimicrobial activity, and preliminary evidence for heavy metal mobilization, from the seed Scripture chose to describe the taste of heaven's provision. When the Israelites tried to describe manna, the food that appeared every morning in the wilderness, the provision that came when there was no other, they reached for coriander seed. Numbers 11.7, it was white like coriander seed. That comparison tells us something important. Coriander was not reaching for the exotic or the impressive. It was reaching for the universally known and universally valued. Every person in the wilderness that day knew exactly what coriander tasted like. It was part of their daily lives. And God chose the provision of heaven to taste like something they had always had. After 50, the body often carries things it cannot name. A restlessness that disrupts sleep, an anxiety that settles into the chest without clear cause, an accumulation of things the body cannot fully process and release. Coriander has been found to have anxiolytic effects comparable to pharmaceutical drugs in controlled research, antimicrobial activity against foodborne organisms, and preliminary evidence for helping the body mobilize heavy metals that accumulate in tissue over decades of modern living. The seed that described the taste of heaven's provision was always medicine. And perhaps that is the truth that closes this entire list. The provision that God placed in plain sight in the seed, the herb, the fruit, the grain, the oil, was never hidden. It was only forgotten. The ancient world did not have to search for what we spend fortunes trying to recover. They had it every morning, in the food God set before them, in the wisdom that was written down while the world still knew how to read it. 20 foods, all of them in Scripture, all of them confirmed by the research that followed. The body after 50 is not broken. It is often simply malnourished in the specific ways that the modern diet creates. Stripped of the bitterness that wakes the liver, deprived of the fiber that keeps the gut steady, replaced with convenience that costs far more than it provides. The ancient wisdom is not gone. It was written down. It has been preserved. It is still available at the market, in the garden, in the kitchen. What was forgotten can still be remembered. What has been lost can still begin to be restored. If this message is speaking to you, write temple in the comments. Not because it counts clicks, but because it is a declaration. The body God gave you is worth honoring, and declaring that out loud, even in a comment, is where it sometimes begins. Share this with someone over 50 who needs to hear it. Subscribe and ring the bell. I will see you in the next one.